In today's video, we are going to explore best Viktor Frankl's quotes about life, pain and suffering. Let's get started. I never would have made it if I could not have laughed. It lifted me momentarily out of this horrible situation, just enough to make it livable. You don't create your mission in life, you detect it. What was really needed was a fundamental change in our attitude toward life. We had to learn ourselves and, furthermore, we had to teach the despairing man that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. A man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears toward a human being who affectionately waits for him, or to an unfinished work, will never be able to throw away his life. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. He ceased living for the future, in contrast to a man in normal life. A man who for years had thought he had reached the absolute limit of all possible suffering now found that suffering had no limits, and that he could suffer still more, and more intensely. A man's concern, even his despair, over the worthwhileness of life is an existential distress, but by no means a mental disease. It may well be that interpreting the first in terms of the latter motivates a doctor to bury his patient's existential despair under a heap of tranquilizing drugs. It is his task, rather, to pilot the patient through his existential crises of growth and development. A sound philosophy of life, I think, may be the most valuable asset for a psychiatrist to have when he is treating a patient. Apathy, the main symptom of the second phase, was a necessary mechanism of self-defense. Reality dimmed, and all efforts and all emotions were centered on one task, preserving one's own life and that of the other fellow. As a professor in two fields, neurology and psychiatry, I am fully aware of the extent to which man is subject to biological, psychological, and sociological conditions. But in addition to being a professor in two fields, I am a survivor of 4 camps, concentration camps, that is, and as such I also bear witness to the unexpected extent to which man is capable of defying and braving even the worst conditions conceivable. Each of us carries a unique spark of the divine, and each of us is also an inseparable part of the web of life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Everyone must carry out a concrete assignment that demands fulfillment. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated, thus, everyone's task is unique as his specific opportunity to implement it. Life asks of every individual a contribution, and it is up to that individual to discover what it should be. Life can be pulled by goals just as surely as it can be pushed by drives. Life in a concentration camp tore open the human soul and exposed its steps. Life is like being at the dentist. You always think that the worst is still to come, and yet it is over already. Life requires of man spiritual elasticity, so that he may temper his efforts to the chances that are offered. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. Nothing is likely to help a person overcome or endure troubles than the consciousness of having a task in life. Only slowly could these men be guided back to the commonplace of truth, that no one has the right to do wrong, not even if wrong has been done to them. Pain from problems and disappointments, etc., is inevitable in life, but suffering is a choice determined by whether you choose to compare your experience and pain to something better and therefore feel unlucky and bitter, or to something worse and therefore feel lucky and grateful. Pain is only bearable if we know it will end, not if we deny it exists. Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Suffering in and of itself is meaningless. We give our suffering meaning by the way in which we respond to it. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Suffering is intended to guard man from apathy, from psychic rigor mortis. Suffering presents us with a challenge to find our goals and purpose in our lives that make even the worst situation worth living through. The Latin word finis has two meanings, the end or the finish, and a goal to reach. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. He ceased living for the future, in contrast to a man in normal life. Therefore the whole structure of his inner life changed, signs of decay set in which we know from other areas of life. The more one forgets one's own self, the more human the person becomes. The point is not what we expect from life, but rather what life expects from us. To the others of us, the mediocre and the half-hearted, the words of Bismarck could be applied. Life is like being at the dentist. You always think that the worst is still to come, and yet it is over already. View your life from your funeral, looking back at your life experiences. What have you accomplished? What would you have wanted to accomplish, but didn't? What were the happy moments? What were the sad? What would you do again, and what you wouldn't? We also do not judge the life history of a particular person by the number of pages in the book that portrays it, but only by the richness of the content it contains. What does Spinoza say in his Ethics? Affectus, capatio est, denet esse patio simulacius claramente distinctam formamus ideam. Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as we form a clear and precise picture of it. But there was no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. Everywhere man is confronted with fate, with a chance of achieving something through his own suffering. Fundamentally, therefore, any man can, even under such circumstances, decide what shall become of him, mentally and spiritually. He may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. Here lies the chance for a man either to make use of or to forego the opportunities of attaining the moral values that a difficult situation may afford him. And this decides whether he is worthy of his sufferings or not. Instead of possibilities, I have realities in my past, not only the reality of work done and of love loved, but of sufferings bravely suffered. These sufferings are even the things of which I am most proud, though these are things which cannot inspire envy. Not only our experiences, but all we have done, whatever great thoughts we may have had, and all we have suffered, all this is not lost, though it is past, we have brought it into being. Having been is also a kind of being, and perhaps the surest kind. People tend to see only the stubble fields of transitoriness, but overlook and forget the full granaries of the past into which they have brought the harvest of their lives, the deeds done, the loves loved, and last, but not least, the sufferings they have gone through with courage and dignity. Research work done on unemployed minors has shown that they suffer from a peculiar sort of deformed time, inner time, which is a result of their unemployed state. The crowning experience of all, for the homecoming man, is the wonderful feeling that, after all he has suffered, there is nothing he need fear anymore, except his God. The incurable sufferer is given very little opportunity to be proud of his suffering and to consider it ennobling rather than degrading, so that he is not only unhappy, but also ashamed of being unhappy. To draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of a gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Thus suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore the size of human suffering is absolutely relative. To suffer unnecessarily is masochistic rather than heroic. In contrast to most of the existentialist schools of thought, logotherapy is in no way pessimistic, but it is realistic in that it faces the tragic triad of human existence, pain, death, and guilt. What is to give light must endure burning. Please let us know your favorite quotes from these best Viktor Frankl's quotes about life, pain and suffering in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.